being metabolically flexible is usually enough for them, as long as the diet is very much simplified and the gut gets a chance to heal.
Hello and welcome to the Heal Yourself with me, Sarah Dawkins podcast. We share people who've already healed themselves, along with health and wellness tips from myself.
Hello, and thank you for joining us again here today on Heal Yourself with me, Sarah Dawkins. Today, Frank Wright is my guest, and he's a naturopathic practitioner and former pastry chef who transformed his life through the carnivore diet after decades of struggling with depression, anxiety, ADHD, and addiction. Through his work in some of London's finest restaurants, Frank spent 13 years surrounded by sugar while battling mental health challenges that began in childhood. So welcome, Frank.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for wanting to come and share your healing, Frank. So sugar addiction can feel just as gripping as any other addictions. How did it show up for you personally?
For me, it was never in the respect, as I've been an avid cook since the age of 16. It was never an ultra processed food sugar addiction. It showed up as just from whole foods and cooking extensively every day and sort of feeling the need for something sweet after every meal, and it would always be something completely homemade. But alongside that, I used drugs from a very early age, and it was just kind of went hand in hand. When I wasn't using, I was using sugar.
Thank you for sharing that. That's quite a vulnerable share. How long have you struggled with addiction?
I think it was probably, I started to use drugs at the age of 12, which is very young, and it just escalated from there, and the drugs got harder up until my 20s, where that was extreme, to say the least. I eventually managed to sort of exit my current friendship group, where it was sort of it was getting worse and worse and worse between us all. And I made an exit to Thailand for 6 years. And although I did manage to get away from drugs by doing that, I continued to drink alcohol very heavily while I was there. And then after 2 years of heavy alcoholism and a new job as a ESL teacher in Thailand, I ended up in hospital with gastroenteritis, and I came out and I realized I needed to do something needed to change. So yeah.
And do you find, I mean, I can speak from my own experience, that we often stop using one drug of choice, and I'll put that in air quotes, because that drug can be a drug like cigarettes, drugs, sugar, and even things like scrolling on the internet, going shopping, having sex. Addiction is addiction at the end of the day, isn't it? And it doesn't matter what that is. That addiction can be replaced by another addiction, and we propagate that in our lives.
Totally. I'm still an addict across the board. I would it's still in my head every day, and it's just getting through every single day. And that's where carnivore was so transformative for me, because it just eating fat and protein until you're full, you are really full at a cellular level, and you kind of there's kind of, I mean, I actually got sober before I turned carnivore.
Had you tried anything before you went carnivore, or was that your first step into trying to help yourself on your own healing journey?
Well, what happened when I came back from Thailand, I retrained as a pastry chef in Thailand at Le Cordon Bleu, and then I came back. That was the plan, was to come back to work because I wasn't fully qualified, let's say, as a teacher, but I was getting by, and I decided to do something with my love of cookery, and I chose pastry because I didn't feel like I wanted to be in the hot kitchen. So I finished that. I came back, and I basically just met all my old friends again. I love them all, and I was still in contact with them all when I distanced myself, but I just had to distance myself. So I felt immediately back into exactly the same position I was in before from the second I got off the plane, pretty much. And so that was another 10 years of 70, 80, 90-hour weeks in kitchens, new career at the age of 32, when having to work your way up on practically on minimum wage, where you work by salary and you get 30, 40 hours a week unpaid. And I was just getting through the days with brute force and using in the evenings and drinking again. And that continued for another 5 years until I realized that I was getting to 35, 36, that I was slowing down, and, you know, my brain was really, really struggling to even keep up at work, and my body as well. So I started to look into nutrition at this stage, as I did, you know, I was very knowledgeable about food in general from the age of 16. I've got, you know, 200-300 cookery books. I was obsessed with world cuisines. I was obsessed with Thai food. That's one of the reasons I moved there, because it was my favorite cuisine. And so I decided, well, I just started to read nutrition books, and then that was the sort of the entry point to podcasting to me. It was around that time, wasn't it? It was 7-8 years ago. It was only 10 years ago that it's been really, really something that people value. And I was just diving into various podcasts. I started with the vegan ultra runner Rich Roll. I don't know how that became my first sort of podcast that I got into, but I did. So I heard a lot of vegan gut health people and all sorts of things like this, and I went more towards the plants there. And then I did actually go vegan for 6 months. I didn't feel amazingly great from it, so I did bring back animal proteins, and I was kind of obsessed with I was still obsessed with plant antioxidants, and I was consuming sort of easily 30 different plant foods per day. I was obsessed with optimizing 10 spices in a dish, and I grew my own microgreens. I had big racks in my kitchen with the lights at night, and all the sprouting jars across. But I'd also been making sourdough for probably 15 years. I understood that the reason that it's more digestible is because of the higher hydration and the reduction in phytic acid when you ferment the flour for a long time. So I used to ferment my bread for 48 hours with a very slow proof to really just try and take out all the anti-nutrients. I moved on to read Dr. Gundry's books on lectins. So I already had an understanding of anti-nutrients at this stage, or 6-7 years ago. Then I heard Dr. Mark Hyman, and I got heavily into Dr. Mark Hyman for a long time, and I heard that you can obtain phytonutrients from grass-fed meat without the baggage of consuming the plant compounds yourself. And that was fascinating to me. So I then continued with, yes. So then I have found Dave Asprey through Mark Hyman, and at that stage that was around the time he'd created Bulletproof Coffee, and he was more ketogenic then than he is now. But that was my sort of entry point into low carb and prioritizing fats. So that's been about 5 years. But as I said, regarding the sugar addiction, it's always been whole foods for me, but it got to the stage where I never tracked ketones or anything like that, and I tried to be low carb, but I had such a sweet tooth that I would have a miniature, like, it wouldn't be big, but it would be, a small bowl dessert, that's something that I'd make if it would have been a cake that I'd frozen or whatever, a few bits of that with yogurt, berries, all the nuts and seeds to try and get my 30 plants a day. And that was, say if there's 3 meals a day, that would be 3 times a day. It would be like the savory, the savory food is finished, it's like, where's the sweet thing, where's the sweet thing, where's the sweet thing, like this. So as I say, it's never been an addiction to processed foods. I've always eaten whole foods. I've very rarely even eaten takeaways since I was 16. Always cooked for myself. And I'd be obsessed about it, and I just wouldn't eat out, and I'd take food. I mean, apart from if I'm going to a nice restaurant, I would pack lunches to work. I wouldn't eat star food. So yeah, it's a different angle to how people may, have a sugar addiction, but this is how it's been for me.
Thank you for that. And so you tried going vegan, and that didn't really work for you, and then you started introducing animal fats and protein. What happened to your health? Did you see the benefits of that?
So I was still using at the time, it had reduced a lot. It was more only weekends, and then every other weekend, and then maybe monthly. It would get to sort of, let's say 3-4 years ago, and then it got to the stage where there's another part to this story is my father was an athletics coach, and he looking back at his diet, he was he had a very, very high carbohydrate diet, almost no fat and almost no protein. I don't know how he missed the protein part, but I know that he was very fond of Professor Tim Noakes' work, and the law of running was kind of a Bible for him. And it was very carbohydrate focused, the fuel then. And I guess it's only really been in the last 5 years that you've noticed, even for instance, Dr. Mark Hyman has sort of almost doubled his protein recommendations in the past 5 years. And so anyway, so he ran around 18 miles a day just for fun, never speed or anything like that, but that's what he averaged. And when he stopped, he still walked at least 2 to 3 hours a day, and he still developed type 2 diabetes. And then 2 years later, Lewy body dementia. And that was an 8-year battle. And so I got to 40 and he passed. Some 43 now. And witnessing that was a big thing for me. And he knew I was always off my head whenever I saw him, or hungover or whatever. And it was always something that he really wanted me to, you know, to knock the head on as he got sober. He was an alcoholic himself until the age of 40, and he was sober from the age of 40, and that was when he started running. And he passed at about 77, I think it was. But so that year, about 2 or 3 months after his death, I finally got sober. And so I'd been, you know, totally whole foods, low carb, taking my own lunches to work. And I still didn't feel great, but as I said, there's not really a reference point, because there would always be a big long hangover that's still lingering or something like that. So when I finally got sober, I obviously sort of in my head, I was like, right, I can really focus on my diet even more, as if I wasn't focused enough already. And what happened around then was I started to train harder, I started to lift heavier, and then I started to listen to more sort of bodybuilding, bro science people. And I thought, okay, so maybe I can eat some more carbs. And it was kind of justifying it more. And I think they kind of just crept up as well, because I had no other, everything had just gone, where I was so used to just like, oh, I'll have a drink, I'll have this, I'll have that, you know, it was all gone. And sugar was the only thing. So the carbs really crept up in that year. Having said that, I still, you know, having this extremely plant heavy diet, I believe that there's a combination of the two, the sugar and probably the anti-nutrients, or more a case that my gut had never had a rest in my entire life. So it was a big case of intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut. And I went to the doctor. So this year of sobriety, I got to sort of the end of the year, and I was like, oh, this is the worst I've ever felt. And I was so depressed. My sleep was absolutely fine. You know, I was all tracked, 8 hours, bang, you know, high, hour and a half deep, hour and a half REM. And I would wake up. I did for 2 years solid. I did a cold. I had a bath at the time. I'm in a flat now, which I don't. But I did a bath. I did an ice bath at 6 a.m. for 2 years. I only missed a couple of days. And you know, I'd feel great for half an hour after that, and then the rest of the day just turned into, by the end of the day, I'm just like an absolute cloud of depression, anxiety, brain fog. And I was in a relationship at the time as well, and I actually had to leave it that year after 5 years, because I couldn't even look after myself, let alone someone else. And I had time to think to myself. I had read Christopher Palmer's Brain Energy 2 years prior. I did start to think, okay, so with my little dessert habit, I've probably never really been in therapeutic ketosis for any meaningful amount of time. And then I started to hear more anecdotal carnivore stories, and I put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, well, I'm going to be close to zero carb if I do that. And it's going to be a big change for me, because I've always been plant focused, and it's a big, you know, a big leap, big difference from being obsessed with cuisines. You know, I have to have every spice in the cupboard all fresh. Like if they go 2 months out, I've chucked them out, new ones. I was just obsessed with ingredients. So anyway, after a month alone, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to do this carnivore. And I just jumped in one Sunday, and it was absolutely miraculous, the transformation within 48 hours. So it was I think it's the third morning I woke up but yes, so Wednesday morning, and I just felt like a completely different person. It was probably one of the most memorable moments of my life, and so I've remained carnivore ever since, and that's been a year and a half now, over a year and a half. So in the year I got sober, I started my naturopathic health coaching diploma at CNM, and then so the month that was the month that I finished it was the month I went carnivore. So and funnily enough, I was already researching, looking back and thinking about brain energy, and that's what I did my final project on, ketogenic metabolic therapy for mental health. So that was the sort of angle I sort of wanted to get into. And that's things have evolved since then, but yeah.
Thank you. Can I just jump in there and ask why you've described carnivore as your tool that changed your mental health? Why was that way of eating key for you, and why could it be for others?
Two major players here. One is the complete eradication of carbohydrates. So this is it will take everyone a different amount of time, and also might have to add this in here, it's not advisable to jump directly into carnivore. I did it myself out of desperation and not enough research. But the getting into therapeutic ketosis by not consuming carbohydrates and focusing on fats and protein is number one. As we know, as I mentioned, metabolic psychiatry, you've got Dr. Chris Palmer and Dr. Georgia Eade, who are at the forefront of this. And this is now showing the major promise in all mental health conditions, that it's the only natural method that is proving to be very, very, very effective. So that's number one, getting into the therapeutic state of ketosis. And number two is the anti-nutrients in the plants. They are blocking the bioavailable nutrients in animal foods. There's only one real study highlighting this, but it's the zinc and oyster study. Very, I think it might even be in 1960, something like that. But 80% of the participants, one consumed oysters independently on their own, and the other consumed oysters with beans and corn, I guess corn tortillas. And the absorption of zinc was somewhere in the region of 20%, if I remember, at the maximum, from the mixed food participant, and the absorption of the zinc in the independent group was 100%. So this highlights, and this goes across the board with wheat, with the phytic acid and the lectins, and there's all plants contain something that's going to block the bioavailable nutrients of animal foods. So what happened is simultaneously I got a run of entering ketosis and having clean bioavailable nutrients that were going straight everywhere that's needed. And it's I would have to say as well that I had to eat around 2 kilos of meat for around the first 90 days, because my body was telling me more nutrients. Now I've pretty much halved that. It took me quite a while, because I think there's a big part to play in my leptin ghrelin misalignment over so many years of the wrong diet, that I've had to repair my hormones. I've done sort of multiple priming protocols and various few other things, which is where you eat 3 meals a day when you're not hungry, basically, to try and sort of just totally fill yourself up, and then things level out when you start again. So these are the two main mechanisms, I believe.
And I hear you, because I was vegetarian for 4 years, and when I started eating meat, my body just went, more, give me more, and I just could not stop eating food. And as you say, it's our body crying out for the nutrition that we've deprived it of. And it's challenging, but thank you for sharing that. Now, you've talked about the anti-nutrients in plants, and from speaking to people personally, not everybody is aware that all plants are carbohydrates. When we talk about carbohydrates, they tend to think about rice, pasta, bread, and potatoes maybe, but all plants are carbohydrates, aren't they?
Indeed. So a good one here is when I break down with clients as well. A perfect example is 100 grams of broccoli has 8 grams of carbs, around that, and you would just never think that. And then, so if you're trying to do, you're doing the transition into keto, and then you want to go further into carnivore, it's like, so I can have 200 grams of broccoli, and that's it, and that's my carbs for the day.
And like, as you've said, the anti-nutrients then take away the absorption of the nutrients in the animal products, meat and fat.
Yeah, it's a journey, so you have to not sort of push that part too early on when you're working with people, because it's a journey. And to say that as well, even some people, they just don't want to or will never go full carnivore, and so being metabolically flexible is usually enough for them, as long as the diet is very much simplified and the gut gets a chance to heal, and then you can take the hit with missing some nutrients because you're consuming plants with the meat. But it's a journey. I think Richard Smith likes to explain it like a bus stop. getting on the low carb bus, and then maybe you stay, or maybe you get off for a bit and then you get back on and you get to the keto stop, etc. to carnivore. So, yeah, it's quite cool.
Yeah, and I love that analogy, because it has to be a journey. And for people like myself and yourself who've done a 180 from plants to meat, it was challenging. And for me, I had to transition over about a period of 3 months, which actually worked in my favor, because I had that transitory period of introducing meats. But for people like yourself and other people that I know who've gone straight into carnivore, there can be unpleasant side effects, shall we say, that people aren't aware of. So it is about that understanding of how you need to transition. So thank you for sharing that. And can I just ask for more information around being in ketosis with the mental health and the neurodivergence? You've touched on it. Do you want to elaborate more on why that's helpful for people with mental health disorders?
Yeah, so it's a case of stabilizing your brain chemistry, and personally, so this was another thing I went for in my desperation year 2 years ago, before going carnivore. I went to the doctor for the first time for antidepressants. So I've always struggled with some form of depression that starts to break through when I basically when I come out of a cloud of and I come into the brief moments of sobriety in my life, and that's why I always went back to using. But I went to talk about antidepressants, and then the doctor actually picked up and said, "Have you tried to think about an ADHD test, because you look like you might be on the spectrum?" And so I did it there and then, and funnily enough, I came up 33 out of 36 for autism, because the test kind of branches ADHD, autism. I was still waiting for the proper diagnosis, but it would explain a lot, because I've always been a hyper-focused person for my entire life. I've switched many things. I get bored and then I just start something new, but I will just do the same thing and nothing else for 3, 4, 5 years at a time. Painting miniatures, then it was DJing, then it was drumming, so on and so forth, and then cooking. For me, there's the difficulty, the sort of overthinking and organization and all of these kind of things are much more manageable now. I'm not saying this is a magic bullet for these neurodivergent conditions, but I don't think there's anything natural that's going to be more effective than focusing on bioavailable nutrients and being in ketosis for as many hours of the day as you can, but minus a bolus of protein that can kick you out. But
and for me personally, I believe it's our ancestral way of eating. It's what our ancestors did. It's how we're supposed to eat, and feasting and fasting as well. So could you elaborate on what your day of food and nutrition looks like?
Sure. So I'm not an OMAD kind of guy. I've tried. I find it really difficult. As I said, it's still, being a heavy addict, I need something more than once a day. At least there's some form of dopamine twice a day, please. So I eat my largest meal somewhere between 8 a.m. and midday. It just varies. And then I eat my second meal between 4 and 7. And sometimes I split that second meal into 2 smaller ones. So 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock, something like that. I just halve the size. Most people do fine on 2 meals. Sometimes I just feel like if I eat at 3 now, I'm going to get hungry at 9 o'clock. Even if it's a full-sized meal. So I sometimes just split it into 2. I would just do better like that. So it's not, there's no perfect way. There are many that advocate for OMAD to give you the proper insulin spike once a day. That kind of makes sense to me, but when it comes to women, for instance, I think that they'll find it hard to get all of the food in one meal, and this is where we start to see things like hair loss, and is because you're not absorbing enough nutrients in one meal, probably under eating. So I think women definitely need 2 meals unless they can really eat in one go.
Yeah, and some of us can. I could do OMAD periodically, and I just allow my body to tell me if I'm hungry, then I'll eat. But if I'm not hungry, then I won't eat. And I allow that to lead me. But I've found that eating protein and saturated fat, I don't have the hunger that I used to, and I certainly don't have glucose spikes because, and if I do eat carbs, it's very minimal.
So I've worn a CGM. I haven't for about a year now, but I did in the first year. And yeah, I mean, it's just flat pretty much. There's a very slight bump when you have a large meal.
Thank you for all of that, Frank. And if you were to give one tip now for somebody struggling with sugar addiction, like yourself has been and like I have in the past as well, what would that be?
I would say, if you can, just set yourself a date and say, I'm only going to eat whole foods from this day for the next week. And make sure you cook for yourself, and single ingredient foods, carb wise, and sort of, if you're eating carbohydrates, focusing on not so much the sweet palate sugars, more things like complex carbs, and just try your hardest to commit to a week of single ingredient whole foods that are essentially complex carbs, fat and protein, and try to minimize even fruit, to stop the sweet cravings, and see how you get on with that protocol.
And that's the great tip. Thank you. For myself, because a lot of people think about deprivation. Well, I'm not allowed it. It's a sin or it's a treat. And they use different words around food. For me, I make a choice. I choose to eat to nourish my body. And what I choose to eat affects my body positively or negatively. So I look at it as, how do I want to feel, and how is what I'm wanting to eat going to affect my health? Therefore, do I really want to choose to eat that or choose to not to? So it's, at the end of the day, it's all a choice, isn't it?
Indeed.
Thank you. And where can people find you, Frank?
Have been most present on Instagram. I'm having a little break at the moment, but I'm at the Frank Wright _ on Instagram, and I'm just really going with my YouTube channel right now, which has just started properly. So that's at the Frank Wright. I'm on LinkedIn, don't really go there much, but the same at the Frank Wright _ So those are the main places you can find me right now. I also have a school community, which has just recently been renamed. So it's the Sugar Reset community, and you can find the link in my Instagram bio or in my YouTube bio.
And I'll put it all in the show notes under this episode as well, Frank. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your life story and your healing with my audience on Heal Yourself.
No problem. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
And just before I leave you, I want to let you know something exciting is coming in January. So tune in next week and I'll tell you what it is. Thank you for listening. Please share this podcast with anyone who you think will benefit. And can you leave me a review wherever you've listened to it to help me reach more people? Thank you.